Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 763. You know what this is. You know what this is. It's the pre-show, the magical time of the show where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say really outrageous things. And I know we're late. We are tardy, and I will raise my hand and take the blame for that. But let me get the embed code on very quickly so we can get this on the television side here. And we're going to see if we can make this whole thing fly. We're on Google Meet this week, and you know the deal. We talk about this often. Whenever we have to use this platform, you cannot stream directly to YouTube, which makes no sense. But we are going to try a screen share and see if we can make that happen. So let me first off get the embed code in here. Typically, I'd be doing this about, 20 minutes before this. All right, so we're good there. So now I'm going to do a screen share. And let me get the right folks going here. Okay. But let me try that one more time and be sure that the audio button is pressed. Share computer sound, Google Meet. So now everybody talk. You'll need to chat for a minute. Hello, mic check, mic check. Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, the YouTube viewers cannot hear a word you guys are saying. Hello, mic check, mic check. Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, the YouTube viewers cannot hear a word you guys are saying.
Might be a paid version kind of thing. Well, draft.
Meeting details over here. No. Copy joining it.
Oh my goodness.
Uh-oh. More breaking news? What is it, Aubrey?
No, it's I'm looking at the video.
Of the
Oh,
Norman flood. Oh, we got a little line of stores coming into Birmingham even.
this is unbelievable.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Nate's in charge. So how are we going to switch to lawn? What's the game plan? Well, you have no second guess then.
We're gonna wing it.
We'll just
Wing
have to reschedule lawn. I'll see what I can work out over here.
You're muted, I think, Bill.
Yeah, I just muted myself. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Sorry about that. Let me see if I can invite Lon. See, maybe on this James's it might work. We've got some feedback from somewhere, James. I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can mute myself when I'm not talking, if that helps.
Yeah, I can't invite James since I guess this belongs to you. No. See if I can give you Lon's address in the chat, just in case yours works and mine doesn't. Whoops, that won't help. Yeah, I see it now. Sorry. I see it. You want to wait a second and just see if he can get in, or do you, just in case? I know we're running really late here, but it might be worth a quick shot.
That's like a satellite shot delay in the audio.
Flashback.
Exactly.
Except when we have important guests from federal agencies.
You can just stay till 11, right, Jamie?
I don't think he signed up for that.
We got enough to talk about till 11. I promise you that.
Got to be Bill. He's in man on the payroll.
Yep.
He's
You're muted again, Bill.
He's muted.
No, this is Nate's show tonight. So
I know. You get us
Yeah,
started. I
Nate.
can introduce
How are
you.
you?
I'm still recovering.
Recovered.
It's you.
Don't
it's
forget the sponsorship stuff.
It's a wolf pack night right here tonight. Nate,
Always
you got
is.
it. And nobody starts the show. It's a game of chicken tonight to see who's going to start WeatherBrains. I'm guest booking officer Bill Murray punched into this tonight by Google or something because our chief button pusher, James Spann, can't be heard tonight. So we can say anything we want about him. 'Cause
Oh, wow.
He can't talk back to us. But it's a really special show tonight because, of course, we've just gone through a terrible event along the Gulf Coast, and we got a really special guest that's going to join us tonight, Jamie Rome from the National Hurricane Center. We're really excited about that. But let's talk to some panelists real quick, and then we're going to be joined later by Lon Curtis, hopefully. Moving to Google sort of created some technical problems. But Nate Johnson joins us tonight. Nate, I guess you're at home in Raleigh, huh?
I'm home in the greater Raleigh metropolitan area, and unlike everybody, or like everybody except Troy, it's raining outside my window.
Oh, man, that's awesome. You are getting some rain, 75 degrees there at RDU, huh?
It's some pretty good rain, some heavy rain, flash flood warning in effect for part of the area. So we'll, my grass will take it anyway.
I didn't have my flash flood warnings turned on. You do have a big green flash flood warning right over your location. Yeah. 4.19 inches of rain at my house last week. So we'll take every drop of it in the summer.
That's more than Troy's seen all year.
Troy, how hot in Austin, Texas today?
It was.
And you
It
can't
was
lie because I'm going to look it up, Troy.
No, it was actually on the chilly side today. We were only 104 out at Camp Mabry and 102 at Austin Bergstrom. We finished the month. I believe the folks on the climate side are telling us that this will be the fourth warmest month. The fourth warmest summer that we will have seen at Camp Mabry, which that period of record for that first order climate site goes back to 1896, 1898. So impressive number there. Rainfall for the month has been nothing. We saw an inch of rain at Camp Mabry, about 7,507 inch at Bergstrom, and both of those totals occurred on one day. And we haven't had any other rain since really then. And if you look at the old CF6 form that I keep here, you see Camp Bergstrom over here. This is Camp Mabry over here. You see the rows, the highlighted ones? Those are the 100-degree days for this month. So there you go.
Sounds
And I
like
hear
a
a flash
WEA
flood
somewhere going off somewhere in the vicinity.
That was
That's me.
taunting me. Someone had a flash flood warning, and
It's me.
I told you it was Nate.
Hashtag sorry, not sorry. Although I am sorry because we are looking at some water rescues up in closer to town. So hopefully those will go well and won't have any issues. So at this point, yeah, Troy, you can take some.
Well, no, I was just going to say, anybody has any extra rain they'd like to send to Austin, we'll have a rainathon, telethon here in a few minutes, and you can send any rain you have to Austin.
I think Aubrey's had her fill.
Yeah.
She can send some your way.
Yeah, Aubrey, how much are you over normal for this month?
So we had Port Stanton is one of our large cities in the Shenandoah Valley. They had 2 flash flood events within exactly 2 weeks of each other. And parts of Stanton have picked up anywhere from 14 to 18 inches of rain this month.
Oh.
Most of our area, with the exception of just a couple spots, have picked up more than 7 inches, which is about at least double, triple to quadruple what the average is for the month of August. So Troy, we would be happy to send you some of our rain, and we actually needed to stop because now as we approach harvest season, as we get into September and October, we like to see things drying out for the fall harvest.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. You volunteered to send rain to Austin, to Lon Curtis and myself. Send rain to Austin. We need rain in Central Texas. So thank you for your support and willing to send me the rainfall.
Yeah, a lot of Virginia would be happy to send you our rain at this point.
Well, we've had 13 days of rain here in Birmingham and well over 6 inches. So we're over 2 inches above normal for the month. And we had 4 tornadoes on Friday in our county warning area.
You can hold on to those, buddy.
Yeah.
We had 3 F1s and 1 EF0. So yeah, it's been busy.
That's a light breeze down there in Alabama.
Yeah. Yeah, just an 87-mile-an-hour breeze. No big deal. So Aubrey, you've already been talking tonight. What else is going on up in Harrisonburg, Virginia?
Actually our temperature today was very, very pleasant because we got a nice little wedge of cold air. So right now I am currently 66 over 66.
Oh my goodness.
So I suspect we have a little fog out there. But yeah, our high temperature was actually at midnight at 69. So afternoon high was 67. So it's been pleasant, but we're going to stay humid this week with a few more rain chances. And then we'll see a nice drop in humidity for the weekend as that cold front swings through, and probably not a significant drop in temperatures. It doesn't look like we're going to turn to the really refreshing air until about the middle of the month when we get that, at least part of that little trough that's dipping to move a little bit more to the east.
Yeah, look like we might have some 50s in our forecast before this is over with.
Yep.
James can't confirm nor deny that because he can't speak. But look like there might be some 50s out there in our future. Jen Nairmore from Flavortown, what's going on?
Hello. Hey,
What's going on in your
it
world?
is dry here, Troy, in Flavortown. So I am with you, my friend. We've had a couple of dry days. It got warm again. We do have some rain in the forecast though, and with the front coming in, and should be back in the 70s by Friday. So I'm looking forward to that. We're in that roller coaster.
Yeah.
You know, it gets cool, then it warms up real quick, and then it gets cool again. So that's where we're at here.
Well, it looks like that we're going to see a pretty big pattern change in the U.S.
Yeah.
The 8 to 14 day, the CPC folks, and this is a big pattern change. You really go and look at that 8 to 14 day outlook. I'm looking forward to it.
Amen, Troy.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, I'm going to hope now, Lon, if you can unmute yourself, if you can find the unmute button, we want to see if we can hear each other. Can Lon hear us? Doesn't sound like you can hear us. I'm afraid this is just not going to work tonight from that standpoint. So anyway, Nate, I'm going to turn it back to you. I want you to introduce our special guest tonight. We're so thrilled. We've already got him on overtime, and we want to maximize our time with Jamie.
Sounds good. We have no introduction needed for a friend of the show, Jamie Rome, Director of the Storm Surge Unit at National Hurricane Center. And Jamie, welcome back to the program. Good to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a treat to come back.
And obviously, we're here to talk about your Christmas wish list and what you'd like from Santa. Nah, just kidding. We've had a hurricane, and we want to talk about the storm surge. A lot happened with that, and I've noticed in the last week or so, a lot of conversation, a lot of chatter about, well, the storm surge forecast was wrong, or unsurvivable. Was that really the right word choice? We're going to get into that a little bit. I thought that was it'd be too good to pass this up since you were available. So let's start off and let's talk about the process that y'all went through with the storm surge forecast for Hurricane Laura, and how do you think it played out?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, there's not a spot in the Gulf of Mexico where you can put a Cat 4 or borderline Cat 5 and not get a massive storm surge that just sweeps homes right down to the slab. So it wasn't like a Dorian case where you're, it's paralleling the coast, and depending on whether the eye wall wobbles onshore or offshore, it makes a difference in the forecast. So this one was, from that standpoint, a bit more certain than maybe other types of storms, so shore paralleling storms. And so, as the forecast kind of played out that last day, and Dan Brown, who was the duty hurricane specialist that day, airplane just kept pushing him higher and higher and higher. And once we got up to around 130 knots, it just seemed like, if not now, when? When would you use that type of language, if not in the Gulf of Mexico, in one of the most storm surge vulnerable portions of the coastline, with a storm of that magnitude? So that's basically from the thought process, kind of how it played out. So Nate, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, there's the old mute button again. So that was operator error. That actually was not Google Meet's fault for once tonight. I think with the coast of southwestern Louisiana, there's a lot of conversation about that being a marshy area. There's a lot of the mixed sort of brackish water type stuff, and a lot of conversation about that being I say a good thing for storm surge, and that it might protect areas farther inland. Is that true? And if that is true, did that actually play out with this storm?
Yeah, I think a lot of, in almost a desperate attempt to explain the quote unquote lack of storm surge, people have been grasping at all sorts of things over the last couple of days. And I've seen some really interesting conversation unfold. But what really happened is the classic in situ observation issue, whereby there was one observation that was nowhere near the peak storm surge, and everybody became totally fixated on the lack of storm surge. And it really wasn't. It was 9 feet. 9 feet of storm surge, back-crushing storm surge by any other storm. But for whatever reason, it was deemed small in this case. And everybody got fixated on that, when I think we all know that the worst storm surge is in the radius of maximum winds, or the eye wall, where they are perpendicular to the coast. And that was east of Cameron, east of that particular observation, over closer to a community called Creole in Cameron Parish. And there isn't a tide station there. There isn't a National Ocean Service tide station there. There's one a little bit further east, and it stopped the reporting. So we don't have that data yet. And then a day later, Army Corps of Engineer had a station come in, a gauge come in, which we're still analyzing because it's on an old vertical datum. And more importantly, and this was the part that people just have completely lost. We've become so fixated on just this instantaneous world of social media, where we just take something and shoot it out we don't analyze anything anymore as scientists. That observation was an hourly reading, so it's measuring once per hour. And if you look at the rate of water rise, right as it hit its peak, at one point it was rising at 8 feet per hour.
Wow.
Or 8 feet in 1 hour.
Wow.
So there's no way that observation captured the peak. No way. It was also not perfectly placed relative to Iowa. It was a little bit east of them. So a couple of things that observation tells you. We know that it's at least that much, and most likely higher. And the 8 feet of rise in 1 hour speaks to the use of the harsh language. That's an impressive rise. I've been doing this for a long time, and even that caught me by surprise. And you could see how if one were in those conditions, especially in a single story home, and there are single story homes out there. A lot of people have reported this is uninhabited land, and that too was not right. You could see how someone in a single family home with that type of water rise would be forced out of their home into the elements, into those category 4 winds. And I think everyone on this panel knows that the fate of someone who faced those conditions would be not great. So you could see how, you know, the combination of the surge forces you out of your home, and then you're exposed to the wind in that type of extreme condition.
Well, Jamie, let's Troy here, and far be it from me to be the person who raises a little heck on the show right out of the chute. But number one, Jamie, what you probably don't want to say, and I can't speak for you, but with all the social media, we set ourselves up for failure every time. This social media in this day and age sets us up for failure no matter what. Folks, we had a Category 4 hurricane come ashore. I'm looking at the death toll right now, 16 in Louisiana. By the way, at least 7 of those are carbon monoxide deaths after the fact.
Mhm.
The Weather Service, the National Hurricane Center, saved lives at the end of last week. That's the bottom line. And we can sit here with social media till the cows get home. That box is open and can't shut it back up. I commend you and your colleagues, Jamie, because I think you did a good job. And we'll sit here and talk about this and that and where the waves were. Folks, this is a terrible area of the coast with those areas that are so isolated down in Cameron Parish, down toward Hackberry and Cameron, Louisiana down there. I really contend. And you look at things like the National Weather Service ASOS station at Lake Charles Airport with a gust of 132, that thing was leveled. There's no doubt about it. This thing was unsurvivable if you got caught out there. No question about it. I don't have a problem with that.
And
So
Jamie, the Weather Service didn't get credit for at any level, from what I could tell, in terms of national, you know, at the highest levels of our government. You know, this forecast blows my mind because I can't imagine. And we had a hotel in Houston on Galveston Bay, and we're petrified, you know, for what was going to happen in this whole process. We were in evacuation zone B and a hurricane warning. And, you know, if this thing had gone left 50 miles, and, you know, at different times, models were saying different things. And, you know, we were trying to tell the owner to, you know, sit still, listen to the Hurricane Center. You know, they've got this thing nailed. You know, he was nervous as a cat that we were telling him the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
great.
in this process, you guys came through for us, but
Absolutely.
the credit was not given to the Hurricane Center in the national conferences. And that pains me as a meteorologist. It was given to FEMA, it was given to local law enforcement, and I appreciate that, but not to the Hurricane Center and the Weather Service for the job was done. And I just want to call that out.
Well, I think it has something to do with it being 2020, and the fact that no one can agree on anything. And by God, no one gets any praise nowadays. All we do is sit around and bicker and fight with each other. But no, I agree with you completely, Bill. I agree with you. Hurricane Center. Now, last week, Marco sucked. I hated Marco. That was a pain in the rear end. But you know, this one, I just think that Jamie, the National Hurricane Center, and all the folks down there did a really good job.
Yeah, and thank you. I want to speak briefly about the Houston comment, because this is a part of the narrative that, again, people aren't talking about. We've become so fixated on one little thing, that one little tide station, because we can just shoot it out on social media and say, you know, look, the government is terrible, or whatever it is we're going to say about whatever. But what about the fact that the European ensembles yanked way west?
Exactly.
And the Hurricane Center didn't go.
Didn't flinch.
And contrast the experiences that you had over in Houston with Rita, with the evacuation process in Rita itself killed over 100 people. Just the evacuation process, because the mass evacuation was so large, it jammed the roads, jammed the infrastructure, overwhelmed everything. In this case, we did not have that mass evacuation process. And the lives lost thus far in this storm from the storm are significantly less than those lost in Rita from just the evacuation. That is a substantial evolution of the weather enterprise in the emergency management evacuation professionals. How that story has been lost in this infatuation with a single observation is just really beyond me.
And another storyline that I don't know, it has been captured at Capital Weather Gang. Marshall Shepard wrote about it, but the fact that 3.5 days out, the forecast track was less than a mile away from where the eventual landfall point. And yes, there was a little bit of, it wasn't quite that close, but it was still very close in the last forecast package before it made landfall. But, we knew 3.5 days out that Southwest Louisiana was going to get hit. It was going to be bad. It was just a matter of, exactly when and how bad it was going to be. Right. And given the Byzantine intrigue about the European and how it was really pointing toward Houston, I think that just sort of speaks to the quality of the forecast and the approach of Weather Service, and the National Hurricane Center specifically continues to take storm after storm. And that's why the track errors keep getting smaller, year to year.
Right. And I mean, even if it wasn't for the European, so if we just remove that portion out of it, the cone itself has shrunk so much over the years that alone took Houston, Galveston out of the main core of the hurricane. Now, I mean, to be clear, a lot of impacts over there. There were some evacuation of coastal areas. So I'm certainly not saying they got nothing, but not a mass evacuation of 2 to 3 million people, which it would have taken if the core of that hurricane had ever threatened, the incredibly densely populated area of Houston, Galveston.
Well, never mind all of the oil refinery and whatnot, structure along the ship channel. That's a disaster just waiting to happen, because you can shut some of that stuff off, but you can't move it.
Right. So. Right. And I mean, just to help people with this, you cannot have a Category 4 hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico and surge just disappear. It just can't happen. It's just physically impossible. So there was it almost seemed like that's how it was being cast, like this mysterious surge just vanished, and that's not what happened. I've been doing this for a long time. I see it every storm. The initial day of reporting is never complete. I remember distinctly working the operations floor during Katrina. In the first 8 hours in New Orleans, everybody said, New Orleans dodged a bullet. New Orleans, everything's fine here. Look, everything's fine here. It takes days for disasters to fully unfold, and more importantly, for the reporting to fully unfold. And for those poor souls in Cameron Parish, how demoralizing it must be to have gone through that and then have to, assuming they can see TV, and have to hear people say it wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't that bad. I mean, those people need help. That's a humanitarian effort right now. I mean, we should be rallying as a nation to support them in the horrific aftermath that they're going through now, rather than, like was said earlier, this trivial arguing.
And I've seen just in the last 12 hours, I've seen a post from a broadcast meteorologist in Lafayette and a college professor who have gone and done damage surveys in Lake Charles, which ain't exactly on the coast. And both of their takeaways was, this is so much worse than it's being reported, or that I even thought. And these are people that live in that area that contributed and helped with the messaging, knew what was coming. And they say that Lake Charles is an absolute mess, and it doesn't stop there. It's not just the next rad that got blown off the pedestal that's gotten a lot of chat on weather Twitter, but that's basically Lake Charles in a microcosm.
Right.
That so much damage, there's piles of debris everywhere. And you're right. I mean, this is, it may be a good thing that the power is out, in the sense that these folks are not going to be bombarded by national media that's like, what?
Right.
What hurt them?
Well, you saw, we're just now getting to the coastline. We're just now seeing the coastal impacts in Canada. You're just starting to see the images and footage, and from a residence. So you're just now today starting to see that story really become unpacked for the national audience. And it's, it's sad. I mean, I feel for those folks down there. I mean, they, if you haven't experienced a hurricane like that, it basically takes everything away from you, everything. And it doesn't come back quickly. And so, to see their story not being told in a way that we can rally the nation behind them is heartbreaking for me personally.
And Jamie, the effects of this hurricane extend well inland, as in every case, like Michael into southern Georgia, every major hurricane. Places like Alexandria, 86 mile per hour wind gusts before the instrument failed. Power failures, through Sunday as far north as Ruston. There's still power failures, I'm sure, in central Louisiana. They had no water till Sunday in Alexandria, Louisiana. These are tremendous impacts. And this is still going on, at this point. But I have to not only commend you on the landfall forecast and the wind and the surge, but the wind field is important. And that moving wind field, because, we're forecasting for so many locations hourly, this is what you're going to expect. And we almost verbatim told them what happened in so many places. And I have to thank you for that, because, using a piece of software called, HurTrack, it's basically just taking the hurricane center wind field, moving it along, and, telling each location, this is when your tropical storm force is going to start, your strong tropical storm force, your hurricane force, and what the peaks were going to be. And that's what happened. Yep. And that's just amazing to me. And I went back and looked at Hurricane Elena, because tonight is the anniversary of Hurricane Elena. I guess one of the events, I guess, when it was stalled off the coast of West Florida. And it was just like this hurricane in the Gulf, and it might hit here, it might go there, it might get picked up. It's just how far we've come in 35 years. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that credit goes to the hurricane specialist unit. I left that unit 12 years ago to pursue storm surge. But yeah, I mean, even though I was once a hurricane specialist, it still surprises and amazes me to see how much they've accomplished over the years. Maybe because I left, they got more accurate, but just remarkable achievement. And not just science and technology, but the ability to communicate more clearly. And that has been due to this, and Nate will appreciate this curiosity to engage communication and risk experts and ask questions like, what words, how do we phrase it? How do we do this? How do we resonate? How do we come across as more trustworthy? And Ken Graham, our director, bless his heart. I mean, he's just so good on air. If you haven't seen him do his interviews and hits on air and Facebook Live, I mean, he's like the people's director. He's so approachable. And I lost count, but I think he did 27 hours straight of media.
Wow.
At one point. Now, if you've ever done media, and I've only done a little bit, I'm lucky if I can get through 2.7 hours straight. 27 hours. I don't know how he did it. And I still don't know how he did it, but anyway, yeah. And Nate was showing some before and after shots just for people who didn't know what you're seeing. You saw before more structures than after. In those cases, the structures that you couldn't see in the after have been swept off their foundation. It's what's called a slab case. And so the force of the wind or the water, in this case, if it's east of Cameron, it's probably most likely water, but wind certainly contributed to it, basically just removes the house from its foundation and destroys it. If you haven't also seen, there's some footage in Holly Beach, which didn't get the brunt of the it didn't get the highest surge, I should say. They certainly got a pretty good impact. There are houses that were stilted, like elevated up off the ground, that still got destroyed. And so that gives you a sense of, you know, if a house is sitting up 10 feet up off the ground on these stilts and it still gets, you know, knocked down and destroyed, that gives you a pretty good sense of, you know, how high the water was.
Hey, Jamie,
Yeah.
the storm surge, and let's say that it was 10 to 11 feet somewhere along that part of the coast. How long does that take in that part of the country and those parishes for that to drain back out? I mean, my understanding and looking at a lot of these pictures that Nate is showing us here is that there's still standing water in many places.
Yeah, and if you saw in our message, we tried to convey that, albeit, you know, we don't have the tools to convey that type of nuance, and it's hard in our text messages, but we did try to, and this is a really good one here, we really tried to convey that water would stand or just sit for days, which contributes to the you know, the lack of survive, you know, the inability to survive, because if you're stuck out in the elements like that, with no basic goods, no shelter, no water, you know, that sort of stuff, that's not a good condition for someone to be in.
And this
And
water
I'm taking,
gets,
I'm assuming that right now, Jamie, there is still high water left from last Wednesday night to Thursday morning, right?
Yeah, you'll see pockets of it, not nearly as bad as that first day. If you saw the footage from the first day, I mean, it was still looked like, you know, several feet of water.
Yeah.
You wade or swim to get out of it. It looks a little bit less now than it did before, but still, yeah. I mean, certain roads are not passable in some cases. You know, they have debris on the roads and things like that.
and this
Nate,
is
I
this
interrupted
is
you. I'm
not.
sorry.
That's okay. No, but I think it's worth pointing out that, you know, when you talk about standing water, you know, for those that have never had to deal with a flood, this is not pleasant water. This isn't stuff you want to go play in. This is, at best, it's stagnant ocean water with whatever got brought in. But it's not.
It becomes quite unhealthy really, really fast. In fact, if you cut yourself while in that water, which is easy to do given there's debris everywhere, you can quickly get an infection. And that infection under normal circumstances, you know, might be treatable. But in these circumstances where emergency services might not be able to reach you, it then quickly becomes an incredibly life-threatening situation if you cannot receive emergency assistance.
And for those who are not able to, or are listening to this podcast and want to get a sense of the visuals, we're showing a number of animated GIF timeline or animated GIF images from Dakota Smith's Twitter feed. He's gone through and taken a lot of this imagery and done a before and after with a slide and everything. It's Weather DAK DAK on Twitter. Definitely worth. It's a good follow anyway, but worth checking out because he's done the work of actually taking all of these and gifting them for us. So Jamie, we sort of we touched on this briefly before, and I want to come back to it a little bit. You talked about the curiosity with communication and risk and word choice and everything, and I want to go sort of get back in and pick your brain a little bit about unsurvivable. So before the hurricane hit, those that aren't aware, the National Hurricane Center put out a statement, talked about unsurvivable storm surge. That's as you and I were talking over the weekend, that's going to ring the bell. You know, I've worked in enough newsrooms that if a typically mild-mannered government agency like the National Weather Service throws out language like that, it's going to ring the news bell. It's going to make headlines. And if you type in Mara unsurvivable in Google, you're going to get flooded, no pun intended, with articles with that in quotes. What got you to that decision? What was the final sort of straw that said we got to do this? What's the reception been? And as a follow-up to that, but I'll just tee it up, did COVID play into that at all?
Yeah, so it was by accident. We knew we were approaching the need for some harsh language, and it's not atypical for the Weather Service to use harsh language in situations like this. If you go back to look at some of the language we used in Katrina, such thing. I think in Katrina, we said near certain death or something along those lines. So we knew we were approaching that point. It was just when to do it and what words to use. And so the aircraft, if you recall, there was indication that the system was going to, peak out in the central Gulf of Mexico and then kind of go down a little bit as it approached the Gulf Coast. And the plane kept showing it strengthening and strengthening and strengthening. And if you know anything about storms that are going through rapid intensification, you knew at one point that it wasn't going to weaken. It was just going to go straight to the coast with that full brunt and that force. And so I think that is what pushed us all to like this place where we knew we had to do something. And Dan Brown was the duty forecast. I mean, I got to give him props, man. That was a courageous wind forecast to just to not back off and to keep going. We were on a conference call, and he said what his wind forecast was at landfall, and I basically asked him to repeat it. And you can't run a model. There isn't a model on the face of this earth, nor an academic that can process data that fast. The plane's just coming it's coming so fast. And so I basically said, well, if those winds hit the coast, that's 15 to 20 feet of water. And if those conditions were to verify, it would not be survivable. This is an internal call. We're like trying to figure out what to do internally. And that moment had such a massive impact on all of us. I mean, all of us. It's a moment I'll never forget in my career, that we knew there was something about that phrase, that something about that terminology that was effective. And Mike Brennan, who was sort of in charge of like typing the key messages up and crafting our external messages, then worded it up and polished it up and made it appropriate for external use. So it's sort of a group decision, a group call, I suppose, and it just came about, I guess, somewhat from the heart, from gut. This is what we thought best to do at the moment.
And did COVID play into that at all? Into the forecast, into the process, into the messaging? That's been sort of the thing that's been hanging out there since the beginning of the hurricane season is evacuations plus COVID equals question mark.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you'd have to be under a rock to not let that COVID not play into this. And you have to think about this too. The other thing of this equation is you see physical scientists talking about things and not thinking about the world from the general perspective. So here you've got a populace that has been hammered with COVID and risk data for months and months and months and months, where they've been told repeatedly that the best way to protect yourself or to mitigate that risk is to stay where? In your home. Now you've got this other thing barreling at you where now you have to weigh risk. You have to weigh the risk of leaving your home versus staying at home. Now, I think all of us can understand and appreciate that in that case, the risk of a hurricane probably outweighs the risk of COVID. In that case only. But can you imagine the person sitting at home dealing with this complex bombardment of data and recommendation and risk coming at them in just an emotional wreck, and probably at some point so overwhelmed that they just stop processing, just stop, right? Just completely jam up. That's where we felt most people were, and we were hearing reports of people not leaving. And we felt we had to somehow convey that in this case, the risk of the hurricane and the winds and the surge had risen above and outweighed the risk of COVID.
So Jamie, were you conjuring your Robert Simpson Hurricane Camille that when you were seeing that data and thinking about that 15 to 20 feet?
No, it happens so fast. I mean, everything we do happens so fast. And I don't think anybody knows and appreciates that the forecasters have so little time to make decisions of extreme consequences. And that's why for them, and many of our forecasters are still going through this. It's such an emotional experience. You know, they sit at home and just question, did we do the right thing? Could I have made the forecast better? Could we have it advertised major earlier? You know, they just sit there and play this out over and over and over in their heads. And such an emotional experience for them both during and after. You really only have minutes and sometimes seconds to make these really difficult decisions. And so you don't have time to think, you just react. Basically how it goes. You really just react to what's coming at you. And that's why experience is so important. You know, some of our best forecasters can just do things really, really quickly off the top of their head because they've just done it so many times. And to watch them work, if you ever get a chance to stand on the hurricane specialist floor and watch them work, it really is just fascinating to just watch them move so quickly through this complex maze of data coming at them from all different directions.
So with all of the skill that's, increasing with the track, Jamie, obviously it's still a challenge on intensity. How far away do you think we are from getting as good at that on these type of storms where, like you said, a forecaster, said, could we have gone major earlier? Is that just going to be a feel thing for a few more years or a decade, or, will the models catch up? Looks like the hurricane special models did pretty good this time.
Yeah, I think we're on the cusp. I think we're really on the cusp of cracking the nut with respect to intensity and starting to see some of the improvements that you've seen over the last decade in track. And if you look at the last couple of years, you can kind of see, little hints that it's already starting, like you're starting to get that first few years of what could be a long-term trend in improvement. And that's been due to a substantial investment in these hurricane forecast improvement projects and various modeling capabilities. I think we're really on the cusp of doing some great things on intensity.
So what's next? Where do we go from here? In terms of storm surge, we had you on a few weeks ago talking about it. What has Laura taught us? Is there a takeaway from this storm that will inform, future forecasts, perhaps more so than sort of the usual storms? Is there a big takeaway from this?
Yeah, so I mean, it's an excellent question, and I find myself lying awake at night thinking that too. Where do we go from here? We've employed probabilistic techniques to bring down mortality substantially. If you look at the drop in mortality in the last 10 years, and these have been active years. So this is not luck or circumstance, as some people have argued. We've brought it down with probabilistic approaches. And it's clear to me that we live in a deterministic world. Even our own weather professionals are still very much deterministic in how they view the world, as evidenced by the coverage following Laura. So I think we have a lot of work to do with respect to risk communication and the use of probabilistic techniques to convey risk and uncertainty within the weather enterprise, and more importantly, to help a society understand that nobody can say you're going to get 4.7 feet of storm surge, with certainty. That's exactly how much you're going to get, and because your house is 5.2 feet, you're okay. We're always going to live in this world whereby we have to evacuate more people than may ultimately get wet or get impacted by surge. and teach society that that's okay. That's okay, and that's certainly far better than the alternative, which if we were to do deterministic approaches and leave people and then a wobble, put 10 feet more storm surge in their community, then that's not a good alternative.
All right, Jenny Rome, leader of the Storm Surge Unit, National Hurricane Center. Thanks for joining us. You're welcome to stick around for the rest of the show. Just wanted to bring you on and chat a little bit about Laura while it was fresh in our minds. And obviously, we look forward to the off season for such as it is, the off season, and the report that we'll get to sort of summarizing everything that we've learned meteorologically and everything else. As like I said, you're welcome to stick around if you like. Otherwise, we'll chat again sometime in the future. We're gonna head on to the recorded segments now, and James, we'll let you fire away when ready.
Tony Rice. Been doing this show for 16 years, watching James Spann do all this hard work, and you realize how hard it is when you have to step in and do it. For every once in a while. Sorry about that, Jen. It's like
That's all right.
walk all over your segment. And just,
That's all right.
I apologize for that. Yeah, this is the time of the show, folks, where Bruce Jones joins us from Midland Radio. But we're just all messed up tonight with this Google thing. So maybe Bruce will join us in a minute. But we are very pleased here on WeatherBrains to have Midland as our official show sponsor. They've been awfully generous to us to be a part of the show, and we're really excited about that. And every week we have him on, and we've told some really cool stories, and talked about, because as I told you when we first started doing this, when Bruce asked about the opportunity, and I wanted to come up with some cool taglines and things to talk about. He said, Bill, I don't really need to promote Midland. Yeah. He said, because if people buy a weather radio, they're probably going to get a Midland weather radio, because, we're just, we have such market penetration in that area. He said, I'm here to promote the National Weather Service's, national treasure. So, we've all shared some stories of, about that over the past few weeks. So, does anybody want to share something tonight? Some weather radio story or, something useful.
I don't have a particular event story, just other than just to say that I remember getting my first weather radio. It's a gift from my grandparents. I think I was like 7 or 8. And it was one of those, it was made by Realistic. It was, and it was the cube with the antenna that came out of the top. And you pull out the antenna and it had the big white bar on it that you tapped it to turn it on and turn it off. And that sat, I had that thing for probably 15 years. And it still worked. I'm not sure what happened to it. And, when I moved to college, and it's probably in a box up in my parents' attic somewhere. But yeah, and we've got we had 4, I think, at WRAL. I'm trying to, and we had the engineers run some extra cable up the microwave tower that we had there at the TV station. They had a couple of antennas up there because the viewing area was served by so many different, the Raleigh office handled most of the counties, but then you had a lot of counties around the edges that were served by different offices, different weather radio transmitters, even the ones controlled by RAH. And we had to go in and run some antenna just so we could have those as a backup, so that when we had warnings coming out, we had sort of an additional way to get, it was not the primary way necessarily, but we wanted to have that as a backstop to make sure that we didn't miss anything. So it really is a fantastic service the Weather Service provides, and looking forward to continuing to see it grow and hopefully, over time. I mean, a lot of things, really, we talked a couple of weeks ago with Bruce about, and Todd Laricos about how the same encoding was already built with the ability to segment counties, but also the ability to encode the polygons in there when that upgrade was made decades ago. So I'm looking forward to, hopefully getting to a point where we can take advantage of that and modernize it without leaving anybody behind, because that's one of the big things about weather radio. It is the backstop. It's there to be there when nothing else works.
Yeah, I remember getting my first weather radio in 1976, and I think it cost $39 in 1976 dollars. And now James Spann, Bruce has a special for us where these things only cost about $29 as they are at your local CVS, but he's giving us a deal where we can get them for 15% off of that even. And he has some crazy code he's come up with. Span 15, I think, is the discount code. You can go to midlandradio.com and pick up a weather radio, have it shipped to you, and knock 15% off of it right there. But this is
that was one of the hardest things, by the way, that I had to wrap my head around. It took me embarrassingly too long to realize that Midland didn't refer to Midland, Texas. It refers to the Midland, like middle of the land, Kansas City, center of the country type, as opposed to Midland, Texas. So I thought for a long time that Midland Weather Radio was based in Texas, and I was wrong about that.
Well, go to weatherbrains.com and see the ad there, and go and pick up a NOAA weather radio from Midland. It's really a critical component of everyone's warning system. You can have apps, you've got WIA, you've got wall-to-wall coverage, but that backbone that's going to be there no matter what is that NOAA weather radio. So we'll hope to have Bruce next week. I know we will. He may be out. He's probably in Louisiana somewhere, helping people, distributing weather radios, knowing how those guys have always been. But we thank Midland for their support. And
Bill, one other thing too is, especially where we are now in South Louisiana, they have so many of the weather radios. Midland and their products are so diverse. They have some that are there for, that are where you can crank them, where they're solar charging. There's all sorts of things, and so they offer so many different products. And I've always gotten the feeling, sort of like you and Nate have said, Bill, that that Midland, they're a private company, they're a for-profit company, But I've always thought in a way with Bruce and then Bruce before him that Midland really thinks of themselves more of an outreach and sort of a company that is there to serve the public. I mean, they're it's a monetary, it's a company that makes money, but at the same time, during these big events, you and I both know, Bill, that we've seen Midland, the company, roll out trailer trucks full of weather radios into these areas to get them back out there. So get a lot of support to Bruce Jones and the people at Midland, because they're really great. Bruce and I had the chance to spend time on the phone together this week and talk a little bit about stuff, but can't ever recommend anything any higher than Midland Weather Radio.
No question about it. Midland will be a sponsor at the NWA annual meeting in some format, right, Nate?
That I'm not aware of, but I can neither confirm nor deny.
I think that I saw them on my registration that they are sponsoring a function at the NWA. Can you give us any updates on the annual meeting, Nate? Or anything to share beyond what Todd shared with us a couple weeks ago?
So yeah, so the two annual meetings. So the National Weather Association annual meeting here in a couple of weeks.
That's true. You have two annual meetings in your pocket.
That's right. Preliminary agenda was posted on Friday to the National Weather Association website, nwas.org. So you can break down by session where all the talks are. And then for those who are presenting either oral talks or poster talks, which are essentially going to be oral talks, they're just going to be shorter. And those invitations have gone out, and we're going to start getting those recorded and in the system. And so we'll have the opportunity for most of the talks to actually watch them ahead of time. And then the week of the meeting itself, we'll have some of those played. We'll have some talks, the invited talks will be live. And then you'll have an opportunity for a live Q&A with all of the presenters at different times, so that if there's a particular talk that you're interested in, you can go in and check it out. So really excited about that. And then with the AMS annual meeting coming up in January of 2021, we're continuing to move forward there. A large portion of that will be virtual, much like NWA, with talks being recorded ahead of time. And AMS put out a survey last week about just asking people just what do they want their experience to look like. And here's the model that we're trying to work with, and things like what time block is going to be most convenient for you to sit down and watch talks. How much time do you expect to spend watching talks ahead of time, that kind of thing. And really excited about that. I was excited about that survey because you can only do this with meteorologists, but the time blocks were listed in UTC, in Zulu time, as opposed to any particular time zone here in the United States. And we did that, I think, partly because we're a bunch of weather folks and we operate in UTC anyway, but also with we do have a number of participants in the annual meeting that come from overseas, whether it's from Europe, from Asia, South America, from Africa. So we have a lot of folks that come from other places, and that was just the easiest way to be inclusive and to let people pick a time zone that was going to work. I have seen some chatter that we didn't list any overnight time blocks for the folks who are working operational shifts at weather service offices. And we apologize, but there's only so much we can do. But we thank you for your service, and hopefully you'll be able to join us anyway.
So how will they work in the distant socials and icebreaker type things, that sort of thing, at the NWA meeting? How's that going to work? Do you know, Nate? I mean,
I do not know yet. They're still ironing all that out. It's going to be a lot like the distant socials that the NWA's already had. Maybe a slightly different format in terms of the infrastructure that we're using to pull it off. But I do want to address something while I've got the floor. And this is something that came up on Twitter last week, right after the AMS rolled out their registration fee structure. And so folks were, commenting about how, well, this is expensive, and for virtual meeting, I'm not going to pay for it, or well, that seems kind of steep. And I want to say first that on behalf of both the NWA and where I'm going to be, I'm president-elect this year, and AMS, where I'm a meeting co-chair, that we hear you. We get that registration can be a block for some people to attend a meeting like this, especially for students and early career professionals, which is why both organizations have discounts in place for students. And we want people to be able to join the meeting. And we're hopeful that with the cost of the meeting being lower than it normally would be, just on registration, never mind travel and
Right.
eating out and everything that you have to do when you're not at home, that it's going to be less expensive. We're hoping we're going to be able to bring more people to the meeting. People that have never been able to attend the meeting before, we'll be able to bring them in and have them participate. And that has been the experience of other organizations of similar size putting on virtual meetings. They've actually had more attendance, not less. And we're hoping that that's going to be the case for both NWA and AMS. But we still have costs that have to be paid. There's still staff that are working their tails off, not just 40 hours a week, but 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week to pull all this together to make it happen. That's on top of all the volunteer work of people looking at abstracts and determining which talks go where and scheduling and all that kind of stuff. But there's the infrastructure of the meeting itself. And so what we're seeing in these discounted rates is some compensation for the fact that we're not going to be using conference rooms and having to spend money on hotel cans of Coke and hotel coffee and all that kind of stuff, which is expensive. But we still have the platforms that we use to do all the recording of the talks, to deliver the talks to you, to be able to manage the live Q&A. All that stuff does have a cost associated with it on top of the staff and everything else. And so we appreciate, we hear you on the cost. We are doing everything we can to keep that manageable given the circumstances, and to really keep it, make it as affordable a meeting to participate in as we possibly can. And we're going to learn from this meeting to see what we can carry on into the NWA annual meeting, which hopefully will be in person in Tulsa in 2021, and the AMS annual meeting, early 2022. Which that meeting planning has already started. That these planning cycles are years in advance, and in our case, and I'm not looking for any, all how sad that is, but the reality is that this meeting was halfway planned, and then COVID happened, and we had to take something that was going to take 2 or 3 years really to bring together, and we blew it up with 9 months notice, and we're having to start from scratch. And I want to emphasize that the goal of both NWA and AMS has been not just make it a good meeting under the circumstances, but to make it a good meeting on its own. And we'll find out in a few weeks if we were successful at NWA. I know my AMS colleagues are looking very closely at NWA to see what we can learn from that and carry on into the AMS meeting in January 21. And hopefully we'll be successful at both of those. Because again, the goal isn't just to make it this is okay given the circumstances, but to actually make it a good meeting, and to do things that we've never done before, to include people we've never been able to bring into the fold, and to strengthen both of those organizations going forward.
Yeah, there's no question. Makes it really wasn't even just 9 months, because for Weather Ready Fest, then the National Weather Association Foundation, it was 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had, location, we had a media partner, we had all of these things set for it to be, if not the biggest, one of the biggest Weather Ready Fests ever, and had to realize at the end of March that we had to pull the plug on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we couldn't spend any more time planning for something that was obviously not going to happen, and switch gears. And we had Alan Gerard on a couple of weeks ago with, when talking about it. Fortunately, Alan had the foresight to say, let's do something virtual, and make that happen. And, Jen's going to participate, creating some content. So I want to still challenge all my meteorologist friends out there. James is doing 2 live things on the 9th and the 22nd. To come be a part of the virtual Weather Ready Fest that technically kicks off tomorrow, goes all month. USAA is the title sponsor. FedEx is sponsoring. We got some other great sponsors that are part of it. Comet, Alabama 811 here in the Alabama area has generously stepped up to be a part of it. This show is a sponsor. Part of the money that James always makes sure that whatever we earn from our sponsors gets invested back into scholarships and into grants and things through the NWA. So part of what we're doing here goes back to the NWA Foundation. So It's not too late to sign up if you've got some 15 to 45-minute recorded content that you've done or that you've dreamed up and that you want to do. Just reach out to me, reach out to us here, email at weatherbrains.com, and we can hook you up immediately, send you a little form, fill it out, and get you to be a part of that. Matter of fact, one of my picks of the week will be something that Brian Norcross created especially for us. It just came in tonight. I'm so excited about it, about a historical hurricane that hit Miami. So it can be for any age group. It can be, for, anybody from a preschooler to a senior adult. It can target anything. And now here, Bruce is going to join us. Maybe he'll pop in here. Yeah, we came to you a little early tonight, Bruce. We'll let you get all your settings figured out there. And we'll have a double helping of Midland Weather Radio tonight. So we'll let Bruce get settled in there. And maybe Aubrey will get to join us in a moment for some email here too.
I'm excited, Bill, about I've done one of the segments. I'm doing some editing. I got my boys on to do a tornado talk, and we took a tornado history event and talked through it. So I think that'll be very interesting for folks. And then I'm going to do one for the special needs community as well.
I know that's one that I'm really, really, really excited about.
Yeah.
And that's something you do all the time.
I do.
That's
yeah,
a regular thing that you do for a group there in your community. And I think that's really important. Do you want to share any more about that? Or?
Sure. Yeah. When I lived in Georgia, I worked with a group called Creative Enterprises, and they offer once those with disabilities get out of the high school, they, have to try to find something. What can they do? And so they offer this for adults with disabilities. It's the opportunity for continuous education, but also a place to do work. And so it's they have a day hab center and what have you. And so they have this facility. I used to go there and actually teach a weather class. And once I moved to Ohio, we worked it out where I could do over Skype or over Zoom and actually do a class. And what's been awesome is that since COVID happened, they've not been able to meet at all, but they have continued the classes. And so we are doing these big Zoom classes. A lot of times I have a good 55 to 60 adults with disabilities on Zoom watching the weather class. And I will share WPC maps. We will talk through the cold front. And I talk about the blue line with teeth biting into the colder air. The colder air is biting into the warmer air. We just for the visuals. And then we break it down to why a cold front is important. They know what high pressure is. That means, hush weather is how I bring it up. And we just talk through these different things, and then they'll tell me what the weather is at their house and all this. And then really focusing in on what do you need to be wearing? How do you stay safe? And I was even telling Bruce that, I think it was last week, about the weather radios and making sure that these folks have the weather radios. And I presented that deal to them as well. So I love this group. They make my day. They love weather, and some of them are very fearful of weather, but I try to encourage them to be my weather ambassadors for their group home, for their homes with their families when they're on the road. It's been neat during COVID that they've been reporting from their house, and then some of them have been on the road, and I'm like, are you guys in the car? They're here, they're reporting from the car. I mean, they're just so cute. But I'll be taking a group from that class, and we're going to be doing a special class, and that's what I'll be doing for Virtual Weather Ready Fest. So we've got a group that is going to be able to be on, and we'll talk about the cold fronts and just kind of just do a regular weather class. So I'm so glad to be able to have that opportunity to do that.
Well, that's exciting, and that's going to be a really huge part of it, Jen. Thank you for volunteering to do that.
You bet.
So Bruce, we're hoping you can hear us. Can you? Yeah, now we got Bruce here.
Yep.
Yeah, we've had kind of a crazy night tonight because we had to make a last-minute swap over to Google, and but you're kind of familiar with that. And then we had to end kind of early because we had Jamie Roan on overtime, and that federal overtime can cost you a lot of money, and we don't want to run up our bill with Midland. So, but we've talked about Midland a little earlier. For several minutes, we shared some stories and talked about you and your commitment and your company, and Troy mentioned that you guys provide more like a public service than than a product. And we just were admiring you a little bit. So the fan club was getting kind of thick in here. And we had to cut it off with a special offer and everything.
Well, when I try to log on through Google, it insists on sending me through my 9th grader's Google account through her school, and then the school doesn't let me join these things. So it took some configuring, but I'm here. Thank you very much for the kind words. I appreciate that.
Well, James can't talk to us because he's the official button pusher, but he's not, because of the configuration tonight, he's not able to speak. So we can say bad things about him and he can't respond. So I know you would never say anything bad about James Spann, but if you ever wanted to, here's your chance. So better use it while you got it. So what's your weather like in Kansas City, Bruce?
It's been rainy today. It was actually pleasantly cool and rainy. We had a little front go south. And,
yeah. Sorry, Bruce, you walked into it. We've been all piling on poor Troy, who's dying in the 110-degree heat in Austin without any rain.
That's all right.
Everybody else is getting
today,
wet.
Bruce. It was 137 here. So anyway.
Hey, Troy.
Yeah.
Last hour, 1.21 inches of rain here at my house.
Okay, that's it. I'm out.
Man.
you're living in Texas, man. It's either a drought or a flood, right?
It is. But it doesn't make any difference whether it's a drought, a flood, Bruce, a hurricane. That's the one thing. And you and I, as I mentioned to my colleagues a few minutes ago, you and I spent some time on the phone this last week talking, and I guess we talked before Hurricane Laura made landfall.
Before Laura came in, yeah.
And I'm just wondering how that message got out. I know that probably at some point weather radio may have ceased down that part of Louisiana just because of the communications and power failures. But just think about how important that is. Even, we think about tornadoes a lot, but these hurricanes and the weather radios, how important they are, and the service that I believe Midland does in helping to get that word out so much, Bruce.
Well, I'm paid by Midland, but as a meteorologist, I've always been a huge believer in the weather radio network.
Yep.
Radio frequency broadcasts are good and they're solid. And I may have said it before, there's a reason why police and firefighters are dispatched via radio and not by cell phone calls. There's a reason why they're holding on to radio. A lot of TV stations 10, 15 years ago started pulling all the two-way radios out of their cars thinking, we'll just use cell phones. And correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, but I think the TV stations are putting the two-way radios back into the news cars because they're more reliable in many cases than the cell phone network is. So, radio frequency is a good way to communicate with people. It's instantaneous. One person talks into a microphone and an unlimited number of people hear it instantaneously. So it's a very, very powerful thing, radio is. And I've always believed that the NOAA Weather Radio Network was one of the really foundational backbones of America's alerting system. Yeah. And that people should take advantage of it. More people should.
Hey, Bruce, any stories at all? Are you hearing anything about Southwest Louisiana or weather radio stories or anything like that? I know it's a little early, but just to see how that went.
No, I haven't gotten any. I've sent some information down to all the forecast offices in Louisiana, and hoping that if they get an opportunity, they can remind people how valuable it is to have these devices. When the stuff hits the fan, it's important to have multiple and redundant ways of getting this information because, like you said, Troy, anything can go down. I can't tell you the number of times in TV and radio when we got hit by lightning during a storm, and we're just hoping that the chief engineer can get us back on the air. And there's the teletype still, ding, ding, dinging out these tornado warnings, and we're off the air.
Yeah.
It happens to TV, commercial TV, radio, etc. Anything can go down. So make sure you have multiple redundant ways of getting the information. So I haven't heard any stories back from Louisiana yet, Troy, but I've heard quite a few coming out of Iowa and Indiana and Illinois, where the cell phone warnings didn't come out for a severe thunderstorm warning, but the tornado, the NOAA weather radio warnings did. And that gave
Well,
people a 20, 30 minutes heads up.
I think it's a good opportunity for you to mention, and look at here, Bill, how well I do this, and we'll watch James smile. But I think it's a great opportunity to remind everyone that there's a special deal out there. I mean, for WeatherBrains listeners, right?
Indeed, there is. Thank you for reminding me. Yes. If you go to midlandusa.com, the promo code is SPAN15, and you get 15% off of your purchases of weather radio and weather radio supplies and so forth. So I would
Hey,
appreciate it.
watch this, Bill. Where'd you get the SPAN 15 thing from? No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
James is not even smiling at me now.
I don't think
You
it's
know,
gonna
for
tear
those
up
of
the-
you who watch WeatherBrains, and I speak on behalf of the National Weather Service here, it's their network. They would really appreciate it if you would get out and promote their radio network. It's an invaluable tool for all Americans. We need to get more people to take advantage of it. You buy this little gizmo, you plug it in, it's free. The service is free. And it's wonderful. You're getting direct information from the National Weather Service and your county emergency manager. So if you're a WeatherBrains fan, if you don't have a weather radio already, you can get one 50% off, blah, blah. But the most important thing is, please, let's support the National Weather Service and get the word out that they've got a wonderful radio network, 1,031 transmitters all over the 50 states and 5 territories. And they do a fantastic job. All of our National Weather Service people do. Let's get the word out and help them build their network.
Am I the only nerd that goes to that website that has some of the weather radio transmitters from all over the country and listen to the ones from other places? Am I the only one that does it?
No.
Nate, I mean, do you do that, Troy?
Absolutely.
I think that's probably crazy, but I sure do.
Most
love
of those
it.
transmitters that are on the internet, those people bought our WR300 radio because it has a headphone jack in the back. Yeah, Troy has one. And then you plug into that headphone jack, and then you can feed the audio down the internet. And that's where I think about 10% of the NOAA transmitters are on the internet, and most likely they're just feeding out of the back of a weather radio unit. Just come
I
out of
haven't been able to find one out of Canada that works. Does anyone know of a link to one in Canada? I'd love to see what it sounds like.
Oh yeah.
You know, one, Bruce, send me a link to it.
Yeah, the guy up
Make
there,
them up.
Blind Gordy, is the guy who's the big weather radio fan. His air name is Blind Gordy, and he can get you linked up to all sorts of the Canadian transmitters. They do the message first in English, and then they follow up in French.
Oh,
Or
that's
if you're in Quebec, it's the opposite. They start it in French, and then they do the English translation of it. So it's pretty cool. And they have an interesting situation up in the Northland in the Inuit territories up there. They have a bunch of different Inuit and native languages that they have to translate into up there. So those are very interesting transmitters if you can get one way up north to listen to their latest forecast in whatever the local language might be.
Well, at the risk of turning this into weather radio brains, Troy, I have a bone to pick with you because that link you sent out a few weeks ago about, with all the, with the Iowa State, with all the old archived, National Weather Service messages. I'm only up to like 1987, and all the PNSs from Birmingham. There is a gold mine of stuff in there.
Thank
Bruce,
you.
So
And it's a total waste. I mean, it's a waste of our time, Bill, but I mean, it's amazing. And thank you to Daryl Hertzman and all the people.
Crazy.
Yeah,
It's
really amazing.
It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But Bruce, is there any kind of just NOAA Weather Radio Day in the Weather Service, or is that a function of local severe weather awareness weeks in different states?
It's the local severe weather awareness weeks in the different states, and a lot of them are they have an entire day for NOAA weather radio. So they'll have a thunderstorm day, a flash flood day, a lightning day, and then generally the last one of the week is NOAA weather radio day. And we always encourage the National Weather Service to do a little presser with the governor and get up there and talk about severe weather preparedness and try to get the governor on board. Maybe if they use that bully pulpit, we can get more people to be more prepared for this crazy weather in the United States.
Well, outstanding, Bruce. Thank you for joining us, and good to have you. James is getting bored back there. He doesn't have anything to do. You know, he doesn't get to participate. I guess we could run an email segment.
It looked like he had fallen asleep a few minutes ago. I was typing in the chat. He was leaning back in the chair. I think he was checking his phone sort of in his lap, but it looked like he'd fallen asleep there.
But I think this would be a good time, since we've got Aubrey, to run an email segment. Maybe our producer button pusher could run the email jingle for us.
You know what we could have done is we could have put James on one of our speaker phones and then propped him up to the microphone.
If we're all ready for that.
Technologically advanced.
All right, I digress. So I just clicked a button and it not deleted the email, it archived it. And I don't know where the archive is supposed to be, but it only did it to one, but I kind of remember what it was. So it was from Wyatt. So Wyatt, I apologize, but you were asking about Pacific Northwest stuff, and I can't remember all the details of your email. And you were asking if we could do a show kind of about some of the bigger systems in the Pacific Northwest. And we do have a show that we did about that. What was that? Maybe a year or two ago?
Yeah.
With Cliff Mast, and we had Morgan Palmer on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what show it was, but we did do a show on it. You may have to search a little bit through the archives. Hopefully you have better luck than I do in my archive email. But we did do and it was a great show. It was a fantastic show. And I ended up buying a book about the weather in the Pacific Northwest, and it was phenomenal. So I apologize for deleting your email accidentally. And then this one must have gotten buried because I did not see it until just now, since I archived Wyatt's email. This is from Jennifer Pratt. Last Thursday, this would have been around the end of July. A cool rainy day with no watches or warnings, and multiple funnel clouds began to appear here in Delaware, Ohio, not Iowa, Delaware, Ohio. No tornadoes resulted from any of them. And a short time later, NWS issued, and she attached the link here, an advisory assuring people that these were a harmless phenomena. I've never seen anything like this. I'm curious to know how common or uncommon in this cloudy with a chance of scattered funnel situation. So Jenny, that's really cool. And I'm sure Jen can talk a little bit more about it, but these would have been cold air funnels.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Jen, do you remember that day? Do you have anything to add about this? Would have been the end of July.
I don't remember. I don't know if I remember that day, but yeah, that happens quite often up here, where you get the cold air funnels forming, but they rarely produce any damage.
And they're pretty common across the Great Lakes too, I believe.
Yeah.
We had one in the Mid-Atlantic for quite some time, but yeah, I would say they're pretty common. Of course, it depends on where you are.
Right.
Nothing to worry about, Jennifer, but that's a cool email. And that's interesting that they did actually post an advisory about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one, let's see, we've done that one. This is from Clint Mann. I've been looking at home weather stations and was wondering if any of the networks of a home weather station can submit data are actually useful to the average operational forecaster. Many Davis instruments can send out the data. You have CWOP, but the website is a little bit ancient. Weather Underground has a lot of networks. If anyone knows anything on the subject, love to hear the thoughts. I use Weather Underground as kind of a backup. It's a good way for me to just kind of quickly see maybe a preset depiction across the area, but I don't like to use that data on air unless I know who actually has that weather station, because some of that data can be calibrated and flawed. Do anyone else have anything about that?
Well, Aubrey, I love, and again, sighting is everything. And that's one thing you don't really know sometimes, like you point out, Aubrey. But I like the Davis units, the ability to actually put, and I'm hoping that'll kick in a little bit. Maybe you can see the individual weather stations that I have on an app. And I love how they do that. I have one at the parents' house, and one here in the backyard, and one up at the University of Texas Police Department. And I can go anywhere in the world and basically see what's going on. So there are a lot of different ones out there. I like the Davis units, and they seem to do a pretty good job.
And Aubrey, I'm really excited because Tyler Allen with WeatherFlow sent me a Tempest weather system, which is a really neat compact unit. I'm going to mount it this weekend.
Are you sure that wasn't meant for me, Bill? It didn't have my
I
name
think
on
that was meant for me, actually.
I
Okay,
think
I'll-
you
I'll
actually-
know.
Weather flow. That's exciting.
After I've had it for 5 years, I'll ship it to y'all.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I do not have a home weather station, everybody.
Then I'll just ship it to you, and you can
Yeah.
install it then, Jen.
I know,
But,
one
I'm excited about it because it's got it looks like a really cool unit.
that's cool.
I'm sad to admit that I don't have one either, but I've always been fortunate to live next door, or somebody in the neighborhood's got one, and so just steal their data.
I think, Bill, to be honest with you, I think I saw a tweet over the weekend that Rick Smith up in Norman, he
put one
Bruce, he just put one in. It
he put
showed,
one
I
in.
think it's the Tempest unit. I think it
Yeah,
put it in his backyard. Yeah.
I'm really excited about it. So
Yeah.
I'll report on it in the coming weeks, and
Okay.
let y'all know how it works.
So that's not for me. Then.
Yeah, I'll make sure you get one. Every weather rate is for you, and weather units for you, and tips for you.
I'm holding you to that, Bill Murray.
You got it, Nate.
All right, so then I've got one more. This is from Aaron B. Once everything settles down with Laura, I think, and I hope, Aaron, you enjoyed the show tonight because it was very good. About Laura, I think an interesting guest for the show would be Donald Jones from NWS Lake Charles. He did an amazing job at keeping everyone updated on social media, even after he evacuated to the New Orleans office. Also from meteorologists at KFDM in Beaumont, for everyone, all their forecasting, everything. He said they've all done an amazing job. So we appreciate those guest suggestions. If you have an email for us, a link, maybe a guest suggestion, some cool information, send it over to us. email@weatherbrains.com.
Outstanding. Well, and just for your purposes, Jen, we've moved Lon to October 2nd.
Okay.
So he's gonna
October
take October
Yay.
2nd. So
Yay.
I know you did a lot of preparation tonight. Well, it's gonna be a really great show. I had my own private Weather Brains with him on Thursday or Friday. We had a perfect Zoom call. I mean, it could not have been better. And he's just an amazing human being.
He's
And
awesome.
Troy, I know
And
Troy,
Jen,
you're good friends
he's
with.
like 5 miles north of me up in Round Rock, Texas. We had dinner not within the last year or so one night, and Lon's just a really great guy. So I'm looking forward to that.
He was telling a story you told before, Troy, about Camp Mabry and getting the ATT designation for that station, and how that station's changed over time. And so, any of that story you want to reshare with us?
No, it's just that it goes back to Austin back in the day when we had the old Robert Miller Airport. Most people that had flown into Austin knew where the old airport was. It was KUS, and so when they decided in the late 90s, 1999, the spring, to move the airport, the question was, do you move that period of record for that climate station down to Bergstrom? Well, it originally started in downtown Austin, but Bergstrom was about 6 or 7 miles away from downtown Austin. And one of the rules about the climate, moving of climate data stations, they must be within 100 feet elevation and 5 miles of their original siting. Well, they originally said, well, we'll just move it out to Bergstrom. And I won't tell you exactly what it said, but it involved a couple of cuss words when I said, no, you won't. And they actually looked back and they said, okay, at Bergstrom, back to 42, we actually have a climate database. It's in military form, U.S. Air Force. But what would happen then with Camp Mabry, with Robert Miller, with that data, if we created this station based on the Air Force data, which rolls back to 42? And we started looking around, and at Camp Mabry, they were sort of going through a rough time back then. There was a lot of talk about selling that land in Austin, central Austin. And the Weather Service at the time, we all sat down with the people over there and said, how would y'all like a weather station? And it happened to be that's within 100 feet and within the 5 miles of the original station. And then most importantly, is Robert Miller was in the urban heat island. And so we wanted to have something in the urban heat island that would represent that over 100 years worth of records. And I think one of the funniest things is that, and I think Victor Murphy up at Southern Region may have had something to do with this, if I remember correctly. After it was decided to move it over there, we said, well, what would the ID be for this non-aviation site, this climate site? And someone said, what about like KATT? it happened just like that. That's why it's KATT. We just came up with it across the table, and the FAA bought on it on how to identify that non-aviation site. It's just like Central, by the way, it's the same as Central Park in New York. That ASOS station is just like the one at Central Park in New York. It's climatology only, and that's where it came from. So we have 2 first order climate sites in Austin, Texas. One, Bergstrom, based on the military U.S. Air Force records back to 42, and the over 100-year worth of record, the old Robert Miller Airport data, is actually at Camp Mabry. So
that is outstanding. Thank you for sharing that again, Troy. That's really cool. Well, we kind of did our weather roundup earlier. We missed a few things. There's actually a freeze warning in southwestern Wyoming.
Oh,
I
Can
saw
you
someone
believe
sent me
that?
a photo that they had snow at Jackson Hole, and my comment was, I don't even want to think about snow right now. Don't even want to think about it.
So we've got heat advisories all over Texas, and unfortunately in southwestern Louisiana, where they surely don't need excessive heat right now. Parts of Northern California, southwestern Oregon, but lots of wind in the Rockies too.
Didn't they drop the advisory criteria in parts of Louisiana because people were without power, and they dropped the threshold of the criteria? Okay, I saw that.
Report.
Did I
Yep.
see that Thursday, Friday, something like that?
Yeah, Shreveport, Charlie Woodrum, who's a WCM at up at Shreveport, actually did that. I thought that was a great move by Shreveport. It was reacting on the fly and to adapt to the environmental conditions. Way to go, Charlie Woodrum, and all the people at the Weather Service in Shreveport, thinking ahead, thinking proactively. Good job.
So any takeaways tonight from Jamie being on the show? Thanks, Nate, to you for getting him on the last minute like
Nate.
that. That was really outstanding. Nate, anything you wanted to add to that conversation?
No, I think we talk a lot about social media, and Troy, you mentioned it. It's not going away, but I think we can do a better job as ambassadors of our enterprise by being a little more thoughtful before you hit send, and thinking about, is this truly representative? I remember it was one of the first physical meteorology, and we talked about representative. What does it mean? We just talked about, Camp Mabry and Bergstrom, and, representativeness of data and the surrounding area. And is one data point far away from the peak landfall, is that the most representative thing we've got? And what does it mean when we share it without any context? And I talk to broadcast folks all the time about adding value. Data's free. This is the internet. It's 2020. It's all out there. And anybody, any no photo, 2 follower, egghead Twitter account can retweet data. You're not impressing anybody retweeting some graph. What we need the people in the weather enterprise to do, and I think we do a pretty good job of this by and large, but sometimes there's still room to grow, is to be thoughtful. And how can I add value? How can I add context? How can I help somebody who's following me who isn't a member of the weather Twitterati derive value and insight out of this thing that I'm going to share? Just think about that for 2 or 3 seconds before you hit send. And I think maybe some of the criticism goes away. A lot of people, it's like, well, we expected more people dead and everything else. And like, number one, how terrible does that sound? Are you listening? But number two, fewer deaths doesn't mean you busted the forecast. That meant we did something good.
That's right.
Think about
Let's take that and run it.
1957, how far we've come from that hurricane.
Mhm.
Over 500 deaths, almost the same hurricane in a lot of ways, a little weaker. 125 miles an hour, I think, with Audrey, right?
Yeah.
And I forget what the winds were, but the winds were 125 and the pressure was something on the order of 946 maybe. Rita was 115 and 937, so this was I guess this will be the storm of record for Southwest Louisiana.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They'll find us 15, 18 foot storm surge out
Yeah,
there.
it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And you wait till I imagine when they get some of that data back from Mark Sudduth, who I can't wait to have on the show here in coming weeks. I haven't seen what Mark's got, but I bet Mark's got some data out there east of Creole, maybe somewhere. I don't know what he did.
Now he was missing one of his data boxes, and I saw today that it has been recovered. So
Ooh, where was it?
I don't know, but he said there's a whole story behind it. So stay tuned. So that will be exciting to follow Mark on Twitter, and definitely to have him on to talk about that. It sounds like some of the data that was collected should be pretty phenomenal.
Well, I think this is beginning to be a trend here. This first 20 minutes of the show may have to become a new thing, like the WeatherBrains hot seat. The timely topic of the week.
I think that's an advantage of the way we plan. Let's do it.
So let's see what we can do with
And
that.
Bill, just an FYI, 274,000 customers without power still in Louisiana.
No, it's horrible, and even as far north as Ruston, it was Sunday before they got their power back on, and it was hot in the wake of the storm too, and large parts of Louisiana didn't have water because they couldn't pump the water after that. So, but we talked about Houston, and I was nervous as a cat, because of that. Those were nerves of steel, those forecasters at the National Hurricane Center, the job they did on that. So Troy, anything you want to add to the weather roundup before we move?
No, I would like to make, we have to do picks of the week, don't we?
Yeah, we got to do picks of the week. Anything weather roundup? We've already beaten that horse to death, I think.
I was going to make the move that we adjourn, but we have to
okay.
wait.
Well, we'll hurry. Aubrey, anything you want to add or?
No, I've got to do my pick real quick because I've got to go to show.
Good. Go for it, Aubrey.
All right, so mine is a photo that came out today, and I don't know if this guy's a pilot or he was just flying or whatever, but is a close-up of a lenticular cloud from New Zealand.
That doesn't
Phenomenal.
sound like pilot and
Absolutely.
lenticular cloud. That doesn't
Incredible.
sound like a combination, Nate, does it?
That's generally an evidence that you got some turbulence that you want to steer clear. little baby plane that I fly in. So my pick of the week is the NOAA Data Palooza Data Fest. They're doing a lot of talks during the month of September and early October about all of the data that's available. And my pick of the week is a link to learn more about the project, when the talks are, who the guest speakers are. And if you are interested in different types of weather data and the kinds of things you could do with it to learn more about this atmosphere we live in and under, that's a good place to start.
Outstanding. Registration is now open, of course, for the National Weather Association annual meeting, Nate. So they can
Look forward to seeing you there.
Go and just pile in there. So Troy Kimmel, pick of the week.
I'm going to make this simple, and I'm fortunate that James Spann is away from his button pushing console. Thank you. I have nothing. This
Foghorn. Nate is our official foghorn in the absence of a coaching friend. Maybe he can go back and edit it in. But Troy, thank you for all your input tonight. Jennifer Nairmore, pick of the week.
I have a Lon Curtis pick. So a little tease for Mr. Lon Curtis. I have been very honored to have him write some summaries for Tornado Talk, and he did a very great in-depth summary about highly deviant supercell motion. And he was on the Gerald tornadoes, and the supercell moved south-southwest, and there have been a few instances where that's occurred, and he analyzes that in this summary. And I'm really hoping that when we have him on in October, he will talk a little bit more about what causes that, and why there are violent tornadoes that have formed from that motion. But he does a great job with that, and I've got other picks when he's on next time. I'll pick another article that he's written, but I'm so excited to have him on. He's really great.
Well, that term's been used about this show from time to time, but we'll use it about supercells in this case, highly deviant. And we'll take it here. So thank you, Jim, for that pick of the week. Bruce Jones, if you got a pick of the week for us, I bet.
Well, Aubrey was talking about weather of the Pacific Northwest, and David Laskin has written a couple of really great books, and this is a good one. It's called Rains All the Time, And it actually only rains 11% of the time in Seattle. And Seattle's yearly rainfall is about equal to what Dallas or Kansas City gets. The problem is more than 70% of the rain in Seattle is a very fine mist.
Yeah.
So it's a great little book. Rains All the Time by David Laskin. He's the one who wrote the book on the children's blizzard too.
Yeah, we need to have him on the show. You're in charge of getting him on the show sometime, Bruce.
All right.
He's somebody we'd love to have on. So we were supposed to have Lon Curtis tonight. He's going to join us on October 5th. Sorry, Jen. October 2nd will be a Friday. So it will be October 5th. But we got some great guests coming up. Matt Lanza is going to join us next week from Houston. We'll be talking about that. Matt Haven, Taylor Cirillo will join us on the 14th. We're going to be talking about sprites on the 21st. Then on the 28th, Nate, you got Don Paul. That's going to be a great show talking about Buffalo. That's going to be a lot of
What
fun.
a good month of September. It's like you're racking up all these good shows for my birthday.
That's what it is. That's what we did it for. So that's what we'll continue to do it for. My pick of the week is one of the pieces of content created for the National Weather Association Foundation Weather Ready Fest by our friend Brian Norcross. He's done a piece on a hurricane that hit Miami in the 1880s. And it is a very special little video. I'll share that with the group, and it'll end up on weatherbrains.com. And you can use that. You can go and view that on in a day or so when we get that posted on the Weather Ready Fest YouTube channel. But unless anybody else has any further business, I will take that motion that Troy made a little bit ago. I know Jen says she turns into a pumpkin at 11:01 Eastern time. So we got 3 minutes to wrap this bad boy up. But WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast that's all about weather. We generally do this show on Monday nights. We'll do it on Tuesday, September 8th next week, unfortunately, because of Labor Day. But all the other weeks lined up here in the near future are on Mondays. We record at 8 o'clock on Monday nights when we can get it going on time, when we're not befuddled by Google. But of course, we have a great sponsor, and that's Midland Radio. And we thank Bruce Jones and the team there at Midland for being a part of what we do. We hope you'll send us an email, send us some picks of the week, send us a guest occasionally. Some of us can occasionally borrow a pick of the week. Email at weatherbrains.com. Tell your friends about us. You can pick us up anywhere that they normally consume their podcast. But until next week, when our guest will be Matt Lanza, I'm guest booking officer Bill Murray. And for the entire panel, have a great week and keep an eye to the sky, because you'll always have something fun to look at. Well, we made it, guys.
Woo-hoo.
Thank you.
The first James Spanless show of history. Never happened.
Ratings are going to be through the roof.
Thanks,
Good night, y'all.
Thank y'all.
Have a good take care.
I think you can hear me now. That was just so stinking weird. Yeah, sorry about that. It's just, it is a logistical nightmare trying to use the Google Meet platform and stream it live on YouTube. There's probably a better way, but I'm not the guy to figure that out. But anyway, that was a good show. I enjoyed listening to it. I sat back and just listened. In fact, it was really fun to listen to. So thanks to Jamie from the Hurricane Center for coming on, and thanks to you guys for bearing with us on the technical issues. So we should be back on the Zoom next Monday night with everybody back in place. So thank you guys for watching. Have a great weekend. God bless. See you next week. Bye-bye.